Yeah, no problem.
All right. Well, I just again, thanks everybody for being here. I'm Bryce Simmons, the town manager. We funded this project in part through partnership with One Family Productions, and glad to have the Virginia Tech group with us today. Here with me, I have our new Public Works Director, Daniel Trail, and if there's if there's any introductions that need to be made out in online land, now would be the time to go ahead and do it.
Gosh.
Chris, do you want to go ahead since
You're yelling at your cat.
My cat's trying to introduce herself, and I'm telling her to shut the hell up. Chris Pruning, Executive Director of One Family Productions. Met a lot of the Virginia Tech people. So hello, thank you for doing this. Looking forward to seeing what you got here.
I'm serving as the president of One Family Productions. And again, echo all the sentiments here. Thank you for the town for taking this endeavor on with us, and obviously with support from the Tobacco Commission, and thanks to the folks at CC for helping bring this to light. I think we have at least one other of our board members on as well, if he wants to introduce himself.
Sid Harrell here. I'm another board member at One Family Productions and a Virginia Tech alum of the engineering school there, McKee. Love you guys. Miss you guys, Miss Blacksburg. But yeah, excited to see what you have to show me. So I'll shut up.
And I'm Rebecca Adcock, Executive Director for the Patrick County Chamber of Commerce, but I also serve on town council. So excited to see what the possibilities are for downtown revitalization with the star.
Okay. Hi, my name is Allison Ulacki. I am a graduate assistant at the Center for Economic and Community Engagement and about to wrap up my master's in urban and regional planning in less than a week. And it's been a real pleasure working on this project. We're excited to share our presentation with you all.
Guess I'll go next. My name is Will Ferris. I'm also at the Center for Economic and Community Engagement. I guess I'm slightly different from other grad students. I'm wrapping up my PhD in agricultural and applied economics. I intend to defend in June, but this has been a great last project to do while here at Virginia Tech. So thank you all so much for this opportunity.
I can go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Kit Friedman. I'm a graduate research assistant with the center, also graduating in how many days? 6 days, according to my countdown. And this project was actually like my first introduction to the work that the center does. So it's kind of appropriate that we're coming back and wrapping it all up now.
My name is Jason Schwartz, and I'm also graduating in about a week from the Master in Urban and Regional Planning program. And I'm also a grad assistant at CC.
I'm He Zhang. I'm also a GA at Center for Economic and Community Engagement, and I actually was out of office for the last 2 months due to the health reason. And I just came back this week, and my first task is actually presenting this one that I, wrapped up like a couple months ago. So I'm excited. Nice meeting you.
Well, just real quick, I want to say congratulations to everyone on your close to graduation. I know that as a Virginia Tech alum myself, that carries a lot of weight, and best of luck to everyone that as you move into maybe the real world or more education, whatever that may be. But yeah, I'm really excited to hear what y'all have to say. This has been a great project for the town of Stewart. We're really looking forward to, making this a cornerstone of our downtown revitalization project. And without any further ado, we'll let you get started. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Bryce. Let me share my screen. Is everyone able to see the presentation? Good. Okay. Awesome. So yes, we will be presenting today on the Star Theater Feasibility Study. So to kick us off with just an overview of what we'll be sharing with you all today, we're going to start with an overview of the region of Stewart and Patrick County. Then we'll go into a market analysis, and then we will discuss some of the insights that we learned from surveys to peer theaters, to residents in Stewart, and also interviews that were conducted with stakeholders in the town. And then finally, we'll go into our impact assessment, reviewing the revenue and cost estimates, the regional economic impact, and then sharing our final conclusions and recommendations with you all.
Awesome. So I'm just going to quickly go over the regional overview and talk about some of the demographics real quick. So again, Stewart population just over 1,400 in Patrick County with a population of just over 17,000. Next slide. Next are a series of charts showing the local census tracts in the immediate area for the catchment area for the Star Theater. And this is just some information on race. We have % white and % black. Next slide. Then we also looked at age, where we looked at, for example, % of households with more people over 60. So more of the older households are living more of the western side of the market. Next slide. We also looked at bachelor's degrees to see how education plays out in the local market. And most is in the 10 to 20% range, with a couple census tracts greater than 40 and a couple less than that. Next slide. And then median household income is another aspect that we looked at. And these two charts kind of highlight where people's household median incomes are located. And then also looking at people, looking at total population of people that not in poverty, I guess people with expendable income. We also map the census tracts where those are located. Next slide. So next, we looked, speaking more broadly in the market analysis. The Star Theater really can fill a gap that's currently missing, where there's really, you have on the high end, you have like Kremlin Resort, which you have $60 plus brunch meals with music and things of that nature. But then you have a place like the Wells Gap Community Center with a more lower cost venue. So there's kind of that gap, I guess, in the middle of the market, which could have some more dedicated placemaking space for music and other events, but not something super expensive. And this location could be a great spot for an eastern, really highlight that eastern part of the Crooked Road as a place to people to visit. Next slide. So again, looking at the catchment areas to other theaters and performances, this map shows the distances to other similar theaters. And some of these are much more established and larger. So it's not, I use the term peer theater here, but they're not necessarily a peer as in direct peer. It's more of just a peer as in a similar sort of performances and market. And encircled in red are theaters that we used for our comparative analysis to look at revenues and population catchment areas. Next slide. So this is an example of one of the charts that we looked at just to see, look at revenue versus population to see how much different theaters are pulling in based on their population. And sometimes there are places that have lower revenue at larger population, but that's just because those theaters serve as a different role in their community. Some theaters are more of a large flagship theater, which have larger performances, and other theaters are smaller spaces, which are going to have lower revenue, even though they're still in a more larger metro area. Next slide.
Hey, excuse me. So To kind of capture some of the information and the best practices from these peer theaters, we implemented a peer survey. We distributed it via Question Pro to representatives from these various other institutions, and received responses from 13 theaters in North Carolina and Virginia. In general, we're noticing that theaters are generally owned, not rented. With 78% of them actually owned by towns or organizations. This speaks strongly that it would be within the scope of I guess best practices for purchase to actually happen. The key though is that grant funding is heavily used. A lot of these theaters are operating on grant funding, on donations, on things like on sponsorships, things like that. And it seems that that is a major consideration that should be kept in mind to keep the theater in the green, so to speak. Most of the events the peers are holding charge between $10 to $24 per event, which, as you'll see in subsequent slides, generally overlaps with resident willingness to pay in your region. This is an optimistic finding because, if the events that, people are attending are putting on are, $10 to $24 and residents can pay that and want to pay that, then that means that, if the Star Theater does open, then people should take advantage of these events and can afford them. In general, we are seeing that, a lot of the places do operate, like standard theaters and offer concessions. Some do offer alcohol sales though, so that may be one thing to consider down the road to, potentially boost revenue. Next slide, please. So, as you might imagine, live music and live theater are the overwhelmingly, dominant responses we received in our peer survey. Every theater who responded, indicated they engage in live music production. Excuse me. In addition to live events, there's also some, classic movies. Things to consider also are educational, classes and workshops. Peer theaters do offer these communities take advantage of this. So it may be a way to round out, events and programming throughout the year. And, you could also consider offering new movies and conventions and things of that nature. But in general, it seems that the role, established by peer theaters for a place like the Star Theater is going to be predominantly, live theater, live events, and, community meeting space. Next slide, please.
Hi, everyone. So we also created a resident survey to gather insight into community event attendance, potential marketing strategies, such as what's working for existing events and suggestions that the community might have to improve outreach for existing events, and as well as future events that the theater may or may not be putting on. Events that the community might be interested in, their willingness to pay, as Will just discussed, and also just community interest in the project and what bringing the Star Theater back would mean for the people of the community. We ended up with a total of 313 completions with just over 500 partial completions and over 1,000 views, which is a really, really good participation. 94% of responses were within the larger region, and 6% were from outside. We had a couple of responses from like West Virginia, Richmond area, Florida, somehow. Not really sure how they got the survey, but their insights are appreciated. There may be a potential for a non-response bias just because the majority of the responses were very, very positive. The age distribution, as you can see below, is relatively even. We just couldn't quite get as many under 17-year-old people as we wanted to, and the majority of respondents were female. And you can see on the map over to the left-hand side, that is where people are filling the survey out from, with the darker red and orange being the majority areas where people are from. Next slide, please. So using a Question Pro, which is the survey platform that we use, they have a text analysis and coding feature. We asked where are people attending events and what kind of events are they attending in kind of a free form question response format. North Carolina and Floyd were the most popular event locations, and Patrick County was the least popular. So there is a clear need for local entertainment and destinations, because even though the majority of the people who filled out the survey were from Patrick County, only 14% of responses actually indicated that they are moving within the county to get their entertainment. 94% of the participants also noted that they patronize other businesses and restaurants when they're out and about attending events. So there's a great potential for indirect revenue generated by the theater to boost the local economy, such as people going to restaurants and local shops and stuff like that. There is also a great interest, again, as we'll discuss, in attending live music, live theater, new movies, classic movies, and people want to show up. Really is the key takeaway from this survey, is that people want the theater and people want to show up. Next slide, please. So this is just a word cloud that we had generated. We wanted to get people thinking about, what is the character of the community and what can the theater bring to the community. So this is a word cloud that was generated from responses about the character of the community. And I'll let you all take a minute to read some of the responses. So friendly, family, community, quaint, welcoming, country, rural, all of those were very much highlighted, but there's also some of the smaller words indicate a need for an outlet for the heritage and the creativity and the hospitality in the region. Next slide, please. And then we wanted to gauge community, like how the community would value the theater and why it would be important. And 92% of the responses were positive. 5% were negative, just citing concerns about tax dollars, parking, stuff like that. As with any public project, there's going to be a little bit of pushback, but 92% positive is really fantastic. 3% responded neutrally or did not answer the question. And I decided to include some quotes rather than describing what people said, because I think it's more impactful to let the people speak for themselves. People want things that are classy and fun to do, giving the community a sense of family, keeping people from having to drive 2 hours to go to events, and revitalizing the downtown area. And there were a number of responses that indicated a great level of enthusiasm, but did express some concern over parking. Next slide, please.
Great, thank you, Kit. Moving on to the interviews that were conducted with local stakeholders in the region, we conducted 16 interviews with local business owners, community members, and those working in arts and tourism. The people that we spoke to came from contacts that One Family Production had, and also just snowballed from there. As we started doing these interviews, other people wanted to share their thoughts with us as well. So we were interested in hearing about the local interest in the Star Theater opening, what events would be desired by the community, what challenges may come from the theater opening, and overall what opening the theater would mean for residents and for the downtown in Stewart. Some of the key findings from these interviews included that most people were interested in music events followed by live theater and movies, which aligns with what most theaters are doing, as shown in what Will had discussed, and also what the residents stated they were interested in doing via the survey that Kit had just discussed. But stakeholders were also really interested in community events being hosted at the Star Theater. So just having a gathering place for people to come together and celebrate their community and hang out, because as of now, there are not many places in the town to do so. Building partnerships with other arts organizations in downtown Stewart was stated as important to improve the downtown art scene. So collaborating with other organizations that are there, such as Calliope, Bull Mountain Arts, Reynolds Homestead, organizations such as that, were recommendations by the stakeholders in order to have a very vibrant arts downtown. Main challenges that were mentioned by stakeholders were parking downtown, accessibility in the downtown, and lodging. So these are challenges that were advised to be addressed and are further discussed in the final report, but are things that should be considered in order to improve the potential of the theater opening. And finally, the local pride that Stewart has can help build a volunteer base and ongoing support for the theater. We saw that the pride that the community has for their town and the excitement surrounding the potential of the theater opening as a real positive and an opportunity to leverage with the theater opening, because there is strong support for having a venue such as this, and that support can be utilized to have volunteers come and assist with shows and use donations, things such as that.
I can talk about this. So this slide shows the revenue and cost of the theater quickly, and Stewart Town Manager provided this projected earned and contributed revenue for the Stewart Theater, as well as the fixed costs and variable expenses. An additional grant will be important to ensure the theater can continue operations in the long term. Next slide, please. So I'm gonna talk about the economic impact of the Stewart Theater in the region. So we have two different types of economic impacts of the Stewart Theater's opening. The first one is the impact of Star Theater's programmatic revenue and spending, as you already see in the previous slide. For instance, the theater will need like routine purchases of marketing materials or printing services to advertise their events. Then these will become regular economic activities in the region. And of course, these are not, the only activities. They're just an example. So these activities induce new dollars, jobs, and household income in the region. So in short, this first impact is about the result of economic activities generated by operation of the theater. And the second type of impact is the tourism effect from annual visitor spending. So people attend the events at Star Theater and they stay in a hotel, B&B, or any other types of lodging, and they go to restaurants, they buy stuff from retails. This spending not just directly adds dollars to the region, but also induce small purchases of raw materials like food ingredients and like new hires to provide services. So the direct theater operation revenues and expenses and annual visitor spending, these two are the pillars of the regional economic impact of Star Theater we estimated. So the slide here shows the detailed methods to estimate them, but I will explain it a little bit more in the next slide. Next slide, please. So for the first type of impact I mentioned, we used the client-given programmatic plan of the theater, which includes the revenue and expenses. We concluded that these projections are reasonable when comparing to other comparative theaters, so we directly use this data as input for economic impact analysis. But for the second, the tourism impact, we needed to make further analysis to estimate the size of the visitor spending in the region. We estimated the potential visitor spending by type, including local travelers, day travelers, and overnight travelers. So visitor spendings in food, lodging, or any other activities are different by their travel type. So we estimated each group's spending using the Virginia Tourism Corporation's data and then adjusted them based on the cost of living index of the Patrick County. And we also analyzed the data that tracks visitor origins to the regional event in Stuart, the Front Porch Fest, in order to determine different segments of visitor types. Next slide, please. So both the projected revenue and expenses of Star Theater operation and the estimated annual visitor spending are used as inputs for the implant model. The implant software is like widely used in academic and professional research to estimate the ripple effects of newly added economic spending. So the result shows that total economic output resulting from the opening and operation of Star Theater is $2,087,892 annually for Patrick County and surrounding counties' economies. It will also create about 11 full-time jobs, and this estimate may indicate a greater number in part-time jobs. And as the result of these new jobs, county households will receive $331,407 as additional household income. So that's our further regional economic impact. Thank you.
We also just wanted to throw in some photos that we took from when Will and I took a trip down there back in September. So this is just a photo of the facade, and I know that the church is not there anymore, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. Next slide, please. And again, this is just a view of the stage from the upper mezzanine. Next slide, please. And here's the back deck. You can see Will in his green pants back there. Next slide, please. And this photo is from the stage looking out over the audience.
Perfect. Okay. So to wrap up, our final conclusions and recommendations in this study. Essentially, the feasibility of owning and operating the Star Theater is promising, provided the events draw in the projected attendees that Hajong discussed in this report. There are appropriate funds available to purchase the theater, but as Will had mentioned, grant funding for long-term operations is recommended and would be necessary to sustain operations over time. The best use for the space would be to keep it as a multi-use facility, as residents and stakeholders were really interested in different types of events, especially live music, live theater, movie screenings, and also hosting community-related events as well. And local demand is shown through the resident survey and interviews. The current average drive time for events is 57 minutes, which we found through our resident survey. So the Star Theater will minimize drive time distance, and more resident money will be retained in the region by reducing the amount of time or the distance rather that residents would have to travel in order to attend a show or an event. And concerns surrounding accessibility, parking, and lodging should be addressed to attract visitors downtown and have opportunities for people to stay overnight in the region as well. And our recommendations for next steps following the study is to further research grant opportunities that the town can pursue so that operations would be able to be sustainable over time. Also building partnerships to coordinate promotional efforts, use of the venue, and creating packages such as a dinner or show, or having multiple events going on at the same time downtown. This could include working with Patrick County Tourism to promote events, downtown arts organizations like I had previously mentioned, artists at Patrick County Music Association or One Family Productions as well, and the Patrick County Dancing Arts Center, and local dining options downtown. Further engaging with the school system would be important to create more interest among youth to attend, as there are limited options available for activities for young people in SORP. So because we were not able to reach people younger than 18 in this study, it would be recommended to maybe discuss with the school system how they could get young people interested in the theater, what type of events they would want to see, how to get them involved, etc. And finally, leveraging the strong community support to create a robust volunteer network and a community hub for the town would be a recommended next step. Because that excitement already exists surrounding the Star Theater, it would be vital to build off of that so that people will attend events at the theater and it can overall be a success. And now we will open it up for questions, comments, anything else. Thank you. I will stop sharing.
Is there anyone out there on the One Family side that has a pressing question? I have one that I'll ask, but I'll defer to anyone else that has one right now.
Go for it, Bryce.
Well, one thing when I was reading through the feasibility study itself was, especially through the M-Plan model, you know, it shows a total effect of $2 million and $2,087,000. I really wanted to understand how that output, or what that output means. Is that, you know, is that the amount of revenue that would need to come through the Star Theater to make it a viable option? Or is that sort of just an anticipated spending through that M-Plan model? Could you expound on that a little bit?
So the implant model, so unlike, the other part of the feasibility study, so implant model is the unit of analysis is the region, the Patrick County and the surrounding area. So even if it's expenses for theater, so if that economic expenses occur in the region, that's also an economic impact. So sure. The basis of this implant model is, so any types of industry spending or revenue, when they occur, there's also like chain, supply industry connected to them. And there's an average spending also occur from that, the direct impact measured, estimated by the simulation model. So the implant model has like 3 different types of impact. The first one is very direct impact by spending of the theater or revenue of the theater, and also the visitor spending, tourism, tourists spending their visiting, spending in the region. And the second indirect impact is, as I said, the other like supply chain industries. For instance, this visitor, like we have like a specific number of visitors, they spend money, particularly in restaurants. That's one part of input. And that in and of itself is like economic impact to the region, but also there's a secondary impact because the restaurant has to buy food ingredients and then like locally, and then that also like generates the chain events of economic activities. So that's what implant measures. And the third one, which is induced impact. So as I said, there are about 11 new jobs expected. So they have this household income, and they will spend some portion of this income for goods and services in this area. So that economic impact is also captured in that induced impact. So if you read the report, there's three different types of impact, and the final total impact is the sum of those three.
Sure. So if I'm understanding correctly, so on the outputs, that is the expected revenue that would come to the theater would be a direct effect. Then the indirect would be those support industries like your food service, your housing. That is what they could expect to be paid to those services through opening the Star Theater. And then the induced would be, what would be the induced effect?
It's kind of a really like not second, like third, like, so the induced one is the economic activities generated by the newly added income to
Okay.
new hires.
Okay, gotcha, understood. All right, so that $2 million, $2,087,000 would be sort of that would be new revenue being spent in the town of Stewart and the surrounding region.
That would be with you're thinking of like growth in your GDP.
Yes.
But that's what the impact would look like.
Okay. I wanted to understand if that was more along the lines of, if we're not meeting that expense goal, then then the Star Theater isn't feasible. This is more of this is the revenues that we should expect to see from visitation of the Star Theater in the surrounding industries. Okay.
And just the operation of the Star Theater, what you're looking at is like, if you have a new business that is operating and it is bringing money in from outside of the region, so people are coming into the region as a result, and that's the theater's revenue.
Sure.
Then that all of that ends up spending and creating additional economic activity in Patrick County.
Right.
So really it's saying, thanks. So if the Star Theater were to open and activity and it was successful, then this is what economic impact you could expect from it.
Okay. So if I'm even touching on that a little bit more, if 1.426 million, so 1.46 million, if we're sort of not seeing those revenues coming into the Star Theater, then we might need to reevaluate what that model looks like. Is that what I'm understanding?
Those revenues and also tourist and estimated tourists coming into the region.
Got it.
Right, Hejong? Sorry, not to step on you.
No, I mean, I appreciate that.
The reason I'm asking is I want to be able to better describe to council what these numbers really mean. And then I had one more question. I know that you did, you did an evaluation of a number of existing theaters. If I wanted to ask council to visit one of the theaters that you surveyed. Which one do you think is probably the most representative of, you know, what we want and what we're trying to do with the Star Theater?
Hey, so I guess I'll take that since I did the peer survey. So in general, I would say, respecting some of the participant confidentiality, there are a number of ones that would be great. We're, you know, obviously looking for one in a smaller town, potentially rural type area. One thing I can do, Bryce, we asked at the end of our survey, would you be interested in follow-up and having additional conversations?
Sure.
And the overwhelming sentiment among your peers is that, you know, it's not, I mean, obviously the market in general is competitive, but they want to see y'all succeed. I mean, I can send you over some emails of some folks that would be more than happy to have a conversation, you know, depending on, you know, how those initial, you know, outreaches go. You could probably end up visiting as many as you want or as many as you're able. I mean, like I said, I cannot stress enough how excited they all were to take the survey and, you know, how willing they were to engage in whatever follow-up conversation necessary. I mean, the sentiment is, you know, rising tide lifts all ships. So if we can boost small town, you know, theaters everywhere, then that just helps, you know, grow the industry and strengthen the industry throughout the region and beyond.
Yeah, I mean, if they're willing to, you know, let me sort of pick their brain to figure out how this works, I'd love to have that information. So
Sure thing. Bryce, I'll do some emails and facilitate a little introduction or two. So that's no problem.
And I did have a question about the peer theaters. Was the Masonic Theater in Clifton Forge contacted? Because I feel like that is very similar to Stewart and Patrick County.
They were within our distribution and outreach.
Okay, so they just didn't get back on the survey, or because I didn't really see any information in there wasn't a lot, so I just didn't know if they didn't provide it or how that worked.
You can say if they responded. Well,
Okay, I can double check. I'm pretty sure they did in fact get back to us. I'm just trying to maintain some participant confidentiality because, you know, but I'm pretty sure from, you know, what our call, I'll take a look at the data, but they did in fact get back to us.
Because the other one that I feel like is very similar to us would be the new Lyric Theater over in St. Paul, but I think they just opened, I think December. So obviously they don't really have historical data to go on, but they might be somebody who can say, this is how we did it, and it might work for you. And being over in St. Paul, we're not really in direct competition.
St. Paul might be interesting, particularly since they wouldn't have provided a lot of great information for this in particular, but
Right.
talking to them, trying to find out what resources, like grant resources they've used, that like current grant resources, that would be useful for you.
Right. Since they're the Virginia tourism poster child of Southwest Virginia right now.
Pretty much, yeah.
And Bryce, just to follow up on that, just a reminder, and Rebecca, I don't know if you were on these emails, but months ago, Ian with the Grandin Theater had reached out about being a resource as well. So now that we've got this additional information, it might be a good time to follow up and see what questions we might want to pose there. Obviously, a little different, but still, if they're willing to talk, I'm willing to listen.
Any other burning questions out there?
I don't know if it's burning, but I'll ask it. I'm just curious, of all the different pieces that you worked on here, anybody have anything that was like super surprising to them that they were not expecting, that they felt like would be worth mentioning?
I can take that one. So we were not expecting the response rate that we did get on the resident survey. You know, we were thinking we would be lucky to get 50 or 100 responses, and we ended up with over 300 completions and over 500 like partial responses, as well as just like the overwhelmingly positive like community support and enthusiasm for this project. It was like really cool to see that and what opening this theater would mean for the community. People are really invested in the project and people really want it to succeed.
I took that survey, but it's been so long I don't remember. Was there a question on there like zip code?
Yeah.
And or whether they're town residents? Because just because they're a 24171 zip code does not mean that they are a town resident. That 24171 is like a third of the county.
I believe it was just by zip code.
I guess the one thing,
Oh, go ahead, Will.
I was gonna say, the one thing to consider though, even if they're not, I mean, even if they're in the zip code and not strictly a town resident, demand doesn't care about, if you live on one side or the other of the border, so.
I understand that, but from a town aspect, if town resident tax money is buying this theater, to know if the actual town residents are the ones who are pro for it.
Yeah, we only did it by zip code.
Yeah, I
All
think
right,
that's
thanks.
But the response, whether it was town or not, I think was, correct me if I'm wrong, Kay, it was overwhelmingly, yes, we want this, provided, there are some contingencies. And again, I apologize for coming in late. I'm pretty sure, Allison, I'm sure you addressed this, but talking about like the governance structure of how the theater will be, where you have, you should have some sort of board that is made up of like an assortment of different arts organizations and representatives in the town. I think as long as that's there, I think you'll have a lot of town support.
One thing, well, I know that you mentioned that there's concerns about parking. That's one thing that we've run into, and I continue to run into everywhere I've ever lived. And I continue to say that most people will say, if you can't park right in front of where you want to go, then people will say that there's no parking. And that's a lot of times that's just not the case. Typically when you're trying to develop a downtown, you want people to walk and peruse, to see the different businesses that exist. So I do appreciate y'all putting that comment in there. But I tend to combat that comment with all my might, just because I've been dealing with it for my entire career. And but yeah, I mean, just from the few number of events that we've had to move to the Star, just recently, the town's beer and wine festival, they were calling for basically torrential downpours on that day. The event was moved to the Star successfully in a very short period. So I think that just shows that, there is definitely a need for an indoor venue that can be a backup for any time that we have something outside. And, I really applaud the work that you all have done on this project. It's, again, the 92% positive response. I've never seen anything get that sort of, overwhelming response for. So whoever you asked and whoever filled out the survey, it's just great news. And, I can't, I'm excited about it. And, I just don't know where to get started. That's one and the same.
I think that's one of the things that stood out to me. And Kit, I'm really glad that you responded in that way about the thing that surprised you, because I think when we do economic development work, it's so hard sometimes to quantify the pride that people have in a place, as well as, their ability to want to show up and to collaborate. And those are things that I think are going to be crucial to our success if this does move forward, and something that I feel like has gotten us to even having these conversations or these like long-term collaborations and people dreaming for the future and really trying to find a piece of pride. So I don't know, that just speaks to my heart and so much of the work that we do with One Family. And it's not always something that, really floats to the top in a lot of areas. So I'm really glad that that was shared. And Sarah, I also really appreciate the comment about the advisory board component, because I do think that if we're going to continue to build on this type of success, it's going to take pulling the resources together in a way that's going to build long-term sustainability, and getting as many people at the table early on is only going to help everybody.
And I will say, just to reiterate, Sarah and Kit, I've been working in this kind of work for over a decade now, and I have never seen the response rate that you guys received in your survey. It was shocking and impressive. So you have a lot of people who are very passionate about this.
That's awesome.
Now, I guess just to be the devil's advocate, do you think that there could be some sort of bias with it being predominantly women and over 17 years old?
I mean, words are so hard. I absolutely do think that there is a huge potential for a non-response bias just with the demographics that we got in the survey and the overwhelmingly positive response. But even so, the overwhelmingly positive response, I can't tell you if that outweighs the non-response bias or not, but I think that if we just take it at face value, it's still incredibly impressive.
Sure. I mean, I think that you probably got a lot of responses from people that would use the Star Theater, would be willing to go to the Star Theater. So
yeah, and that's what it seemed like. It was a lot of people saying, we want to go somewhere that is in town. We want to go somewhere that's highlighting our heritage, not Floyd's, not Franklin's, not North Carolina's. And we want our kids to have this place to go and embrace our culture and not just have to go somewhere else. We want a safe and fun place for our kids to go hang out. And the sentiments were very much varied as far as what they want to get out of the theater, but they all carried the same emphasis on positive, and positive, highlighting the community culture and having a place to go that's in the town.
And being affordable and accessible and, just a place that they feel comfortable going.
I'm not sure if we looked at this, but even if you're looking at the pure centers, I would think my best guess would be that the people coming to those theaters are probably they have a similar demographic too. So to what responses you got from your survey.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess the one thing to keep in mind, I mean, Sarah's been doing this for 10 years. I guess in my only 2-year tenure here at CC, I've also done a number of these, surveys to communities and things. And, response bias has the potential to, manifest in anything. So to an extent, you should temper your expectations on any survey you do, because those that respond are probably going to be the happiest in some cases, or sometimes, the ones with the strongest negative opinions. But the thing is, like, when we're saying that the response was, impressively, positive, we're comparing that not to just, any opinion, or I mean, we're comparing that to these other surveys we've also done. I mean, we've done all these, other responses and, these other outreach approaches, and, even relative to, other comparable surveys where response bias could occur, the overwhelmingly positive results that Kit found in their survey, kind of speak, they speak highly to the fact that, even if response bias does exist, when these other projects we've done have, found success, if, we're seeing this level of positive, input, then it means that people really do care about, the Star Theater, excuse me.
Good deal.
I have a question on this point. I know that there's only 3% of responses were negative, but in those negative responses, it seems like parking was the main concern raised. were there any other standouts, either surprising or just otherwise recurring, like feedback or concerns raised in the negative responses, or anything to talk about there?
So yeah, as you said, there weren't all that many. There were 5%, 3% didn't address the question or just said, I don't know. But within those 5%, like you said, parking was a primary concern that came up, but also just the tax dollars, and these tax dollars could be better spent elsewhere, as well as the aging population and a desire to invest in other aspects of the community, rather than in the theater, which they felt was not necessarily a priority. But again, that was a small fraction, like probably 10 or less of the responses that we got.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I mean, I get that. I honestly, I struggle with that comment, just from my own perspective of, are there better ways that tax dollars could be spent? But I also have to look at it as, well, how can we invest in the town to generate additional revenue? So that's the perspective that I take away from it. To me, this seems like, a fairly reasonable investment, could bring in $2 million a year in spending in the town. And that is more important to me than, maybe fixing potholes and stuff like that. Although I have to do that too.
Sort of, I know we're digging into this a lot, but we might as well just get to the root here. Like, it sounded like you guys had some age data on these responses. Did I hear that correctly? Like there was, you knew at least that you did not get very many under 18-year-old responses, correct? Could I ask, could you expand a little bit on like what was the age range that you got the most response from? And another question, it's probably too much to ask, but do you know, like, is there an age range where most of those negative responses came from?
I don't know off the top of my head the age range for negative responses, but just pulling up the slide, we had a pretty even distribution of people over 25. 17% were 25 to 34, 21% were 35 to 44, 20% were 45 to 54, 17% 55 64, and then 20% were over 65. 4% of responses were 18 to 24, and 1% was under 17.
Okay,
So
yeah, thank you.
we did get like a solid spread of
Right,
age distribution.
yeah, there's no one demographic that did all the answering, that's for sure. It's pretty wide.
And I will say, in theory, we shouldn't get anyone under 18 in general, for surveys like this. So
Sure, yeah, the fact that you got one is like that,
it's a little weird, honestly.
That they took the time.
that guy's getting like looking for a public policy major next year. You know?
All right. Well, I don't want to hold anyone else up. I know that y'all are all busy and going through finals, and yeah, I can remember how that goes. So I'm sure that every minute is precious right now. But again, I do want to thank everyone. I want to thank the Center for Economic and Community Engagement. I had to remember how it goes. You've done a great job on this. And, I'm really looking forward to providing this presentation to our council. Hopefully we can do this again. Well, if there's
You know
nothing
where to
else,
find us. So.
yeah. We got your number now. Well, if there's nothing else, we'll get this wrapped up and say thank you to everyone.
Bryce, you'll send out the recording. You ended up with that, is that correct?
I do have it recording on my computer, so.
Okay,
yep,
perfect.
we can
I'd
do
love to
that.
send that to the rest of our board and just echoing Bryce, thank you all for your hard work on this and we will keep you updated on the progress.
Ditto.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye.